Well, it's great to be with my friend Rick Enloe. I think today is going to be just such an incredible time. This is Monty Hip, and I'm here with the Fourth Place podcast. It is a day that I'm really excited about having. Rick, thanks for joining us today. It really is fun to have you.
Thanks, Mont. Yeah, I look forward to it because we go way back, man.
Well, one of the things we've determined at the Fourth Place, kind of the name for the podcast really resulted out of, we really found that there are really four places that people have such important moments of life at. And as a
Hmm.
result, we just not only named our podcast that, but it's kind of leads into our whole frame of our discussion. I think this is going to be a fun hour, but I think it's going to be an important hour. So we're going to dive right in, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah,
And
it'd be great.
the first place that's just one of those things that just happens in life, your home is really one of those places that's designed to be a place of respite, fun memories, moments that you just can look back on. And so I want to talk about your first place, your home. Tell me some of the things you first remember about your home life as a kid growing
As a
up. I
kid,
know you
okay.
grew up in a great big metropolitan area.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, no, I actually the whole town I lived in had about less than, a quarter of an apartment house has in it, like up to 500 people. But like my dad used to say, there's 500 and some odd ones. So I used to ask him, like, Dad, do you think I'm gonna, find a wife in this tiny little town? And he'd say, well, the odds are good, but the goods are odd. So he had a bunch of those things like that. So, but yeah, my dad and mom were, ended up being married forever, and but they had four kids. I was the oldest son. I had an older sister, and they were kind of. I actually said this one time when I was talking to a group of people. I said, no, my parents were migrant workers, and my mom was in the crowd, and she comes up and she goes, "Hey, that's kind of hurt my feelings." And I go, "Mom, like seriously," because she thought I was sort of like saying that they were I don't know, like illegally in the country or something. But I was saying no, but it's true because they just constantly kind of were looking for some kind of employment opportunities, and so we moved all over the place. And yeah, so what happened was I actually credit that as a kind of a cool opportunity for me because I had to learn how to get to know people, because I was always like the new kid in class.
Wow.
And I always tell kids when they're asking me about this, I say, well, as soon as I showed up, I'm the new kid at class. Hey, students, we have a new, middle of the school year, all that kind of stuff. We have a new student here. His name is Rick, and whatever. And I could see the smartest kid in the class thinking, hey, I wonder how smart this guy is. And I could see like the fastest kid in the class thinking, I wonder how fast this kid is. And then I could think, I could see the guy that was like the best looking guy thinking, I'm good. So
Yeah. So when you
but
think
anyway.
about that, all those transfers of schools, there's got to be some fun memories you have about elementary, middle school, some stories. What's something about that home world life back in the day that you remember that stand out to you? Just, school life, home life.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that was fun was um, I, I was since I was the second oldest kid. When I learned how to ride a bike, my parents gave me my sister's bike, and she got a different one. Well, so it was this little beat up green bike, and I still remember running all over the neighborhood. Just getting a kick out of being, having my own bike. It was kind of like freedom and everything. I think I was probably third grader or something. And all of a sudden, this kid, this loud kid at the city park, he goes, "Hey, why are you riding a sissy bike?" And I thought, well, how does he know that my sister had this bike, right? I mean, and he's like, I go, how do what do you mean? And he goes, boys' bikes always have a bar on the top bar, and that doesn't have the top bar, so that's a girl's bike. And I was like, okay, whatever. And nobody ever told me that, right? So I remember riding home thinking, you're kidding. Like this whole time I've been riding around and like people can tell it's not a boy's bike. So I got home and I said to my dad, like, thanks a lot. Like I got made fun of for riding a girl's bike. And he goes, oh yeah, I didn't know you knew anything about that. And I said, well, yeah, I do now. And then I asked him this question: who decided that a boy's bike should have a top bar? Like that's the dumbest decision ever, especially especially if you hit a curb or two.
Somebody was
Like I'm thinking
mad.
like And so I thought this has to be some, some orthopedic surgeon who's planning for his future or something. I don't know. But anyway, I still remember that I really did spend a lot of my childhood on my bicycle. I had a paper route. So, it was the old classic. Remember those paper route, those bags that went
Oh
over your
yeah,
head
that
and
came
you had
over,
a,
you
a
could stack them in
pouch?
the front and back. Yeah.
Yeah. So I used to roll them up, and then, and then back in those days, it was like okay with the folks to just chuck them at the front, door.
Yeah.
But if you missed, you got to get off your bike, go get them out of the bushes, all that. So, you kind of got good at it. So, and then I was thinking about this the other day, Mont, like it was probably one of the cruelest, sort of business plans, for kids, because they would make us, we do all this paper route stuff, and then we had to go collect
The
the
money.
money, and that was the weirdest part, because, you have to knock on the door, hey, I'm here to collect. And people are like, hey, come back next week or something. You're like, okay. And so it's just constantly, you're like running this like juvenile accounts receivable thing, and you never can get the money. And then you don't get paid. So they pay you and you send it to the newspaper. I mean, it was like, I'm thinking now there's, this is quite a racket. But anyway, I actually liked the bike parts. I ran all over the place, and
Yeah.
so that was kind of my childhood is really filled with a lot of bike riding, and and kind of classic stuff. In a small town, they don't have as much maybe organized stuff, but a lot of the disorganized stuff is pretty fun.
Yeah. When you think about your home life, what were some of the traditions and some of the things that you think about when you think back on your parents? And I had the privilege of knowing your parents, and just fun people, right? Just
Yeah,
great
yeah.
human beings. But what were some of the home traditions and things that they did, and some of the things that they did that they thought were a big deal, and you're like, okay, maybe not.
Yeah,
What were
yeah,
some of those
right, right, yeah.
traditions?
Well, of course, we grew up in a go to church family. And so my dad actually was kind of like the volunteer pastor of this little church, even though he didn't, that's not where he got his income. He worked at the local bank as like a teller kind of guy. But he, and the truth is, he kind of actually helped people more at the bank than at the church, because the church was kind of an interesting place where people would show up on the weekends and sing some songs or whatever. But when they needed something, they'd come to the bank and and have a coffee with them and ask. So it was kind of funny. He kind of did it that way. But yeah. So because of the church thing, it was always every Sunday. Got to get up, got to get going, got to go to church and all that. And so, but one thing I appreciate about my parents is that they weren't kind of over the top on the religion thing, because I know some people whose parents acted pretty spiritual, but then when they got home, they're like kind of like not doing
Less
very
than,
well.
less than.
Yeah, so they're like screaming at each other and all kinds of stuff. Whereas my parents were like, they were kind of like not that spiritual at church, and then they were kind of more spiritual at home than I expected. So that's one thing. I remember my dad is he always wanted to he goes, let's pray about that. And he was just like, that was my dad's thing. So like, I mean, when getting back to when I got my bike, I finally got a boy's bike. First thing we had to do is we had to pray over it.
Oh, wow.
God, wherever this bike goes, and so he just like, so that was a big deal. And I always appreciated that, because even though it's kind of peak, I wasn't really kind of super focused, but, I thought, hey, this is kind of cool, because it was a way for my dad to communicate stuff to you, in a prayer groove, and,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, that was great. And then of course we did, most of the, our grandparents did not live, in the same town. So those kind of my childhood traditions were more like, loading up the old car and heading out, 2 or 3 hours to grandma's house. And so I didn't really know my grandparents like people as much as they were just like some old folks that we'd visit, and they'd say hi to you and stuff. But it was fun to catch up on, try to figure out who my parents were and all that. So we did most of that stuff, but I would say it was, we were in the Judeo-Christian groove, as far as,
Gotcha.
Christmas, Easter, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
what are some of the traditions, home life that you had as a young child before you left the home that are now a part of your home? What did you
Oh, yeah.
bring into play related to your home world that you go, wow, man, I'm gonna go on, I'm gonna be my, and then all of a sudden you find yourself being that and wanting that. What are some of those things
Yeah.
in your home world that moved over with you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the things that we have kind of borrowed has been like, after school was always a big fun experience, because my mom would always decide, hey, you guys are probably starving after school. And, so she always had some kind of a treat for us and stuff. And then that was kind of, I think we spent more time talking to each other after school, while we were having a snack
Yeah.
than we kind of did other times. So we kind of kept that going with our kids, whenever they kind of got old enough to do that. So we always kind of be waiting after school. That was fun. Also, I think one of the things my dad did back he used to be a truck driver. So he'd do it kind of part-time, kind of a side hustle.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
so, yeah. So what was fun is he would say, hey, I got to go, like, make a delivery, like late at night and get home at midnight or whatever. So he'd ask me if I wanted to go. And I always felt like a kind of big shot, sitting in the other side of the truck and everything. And he would always use these trucks that whatever company kind of hired him to do something. Sometimes the trucks had like one of those, like a big semi, with a sleeper back in the back.
Oh yeah.
I still
Yeah.
remember, I remember, kind of the smell of diesel and going to sleep back there. And it was just kind of a really fond memory. So what I did is I started thinking, how much fun it was for me. And so I've done that, with my kids and like just gone on different trips, just whenever I think I can include them. And it's turned into kind of, I kind of had an opportunity to take it to another level because I got invited to go to a lot of different places. So I took the boys to, when they were 5, I took them on a trip to, the East Coast. And then when they were 13, I took each one of them. I took Grant to Paris, France, and same with Matt. And then we went to New York and all, really fun stuff like that. And I think we got the same kind of feeling, it was like we were, you kind of get this thing like, you're not just a kid, but like your associate, like my colleague here,
Yeah.
so that I get that a lot. So I think those have been really cool things to build on, because even
Yeah.
though my parents were more in a less exotic
Right.
groove with traveling, but it still had the same impact. So I really enjoy that.
It's funny how you kind of made those, I like to say it this way, moments make memories, and you found those
Hmm.
moments and brought those memories into play, into things that became incredible experiences for your kids, and now those traditions. And now that you actually have not only your own kids, but grandkids, what
Yeah.
are some of the things that you're now putting back into the play with Matt and Grant's family and those kind of things from that
Yeah.
home life perspective?
Well, one of the things I figured out, I think I kind of borrowed this. I kind of built it on a little bit on my mom and dad, but I always started noticing that it was the beginning of something that was very exciting, and the end of something is awesome, but it's the middle that's tough. And the more you grow up, the more you realize, like, when you buy something, like, say I'm not really a all cash guy on cars. I've usually had to get a loan for the car. So when you first get the car, it's so cool, and you're paying the loan, you think this is totally worth it. This car smells great. It's amazing. It's new. And then, and then at the end, it's exciting because you paid it off and you own it and it's all, but in the middle, when you got the cracked windshield and, a bunch of pine needles in the, in the floorboards, you're thinking, what am I doing? And I think the same thing with, different kinds of endeavors. It's the middle that's tough. So I started thinking about that, how midweek is kind of the hard part of the week sometimes, and then I start thinking, one of the harder parts of the day is like, right after lunch. I mean, I know you and I have this in common, that we've had a chance to have an audience with students before,
Yeah.
like in a high school. And, you get that after school assignment to try to communicate with kids. They're just comatose, So I was thinking, so what I did is I invented this thing called a motivational lunch. You're going to love this, Monty, but I decided, just for the 4 years my boys were in high school, I was able to be home. And so every morning I get up early and I make them a lunch, because I don't know, this about me. I like to cook, and I'm kind
Yep.
of, cooking channel guy. So, but I make a different kind of sandwich or whatever. But I made kind of a signature move, which is like take their sandwich and I'd wrap it in like a napkin, to keep it, so they'd always have it. Then outside of that, I'd do it in tinfoil, because the tinfoil was like something you could write on. Then I'd write, sometimes I just John Wooden quotes or whatever,
Yeah.
or like if I knew they had a test coming up, I like, you could do this or whatever. And then I also do fun stuff, like I put a piece of gum in there and say, in case you meet a hot girl, here's you need to stick a gum, or I'd get a pack of nuts and I go, like, you're nuts, stay nutty, or I don't know, whatever. And then I made my own labels. Like I made these labels that I would write, on my computer, I got some of that adhesive paper stuff. I'd stick it like on the water bottle, like, so it was like a personalized label. Anyway, and then I'd kind of do their little brown paper sack. I'd write their name on it and stuff because I like to sketch. Well, their friends started getting a kick out of what, like, open your lunch, dude.
They
Let's see
wanted to
what's
see
in there,
what was in their lunch.
And so then I started putting stuff in there for, like, hey, in case you have a buddy, here's something like M&Ms or, whatever. But the motivational lunches, my whole idea was you just need a little bit of a boost in the middle, And so what I try to do is I try to kind of take that and think about that. Who do I know who's in the middle of something? Like they're kind of right in the middle of it right now. And I've tried to, and of course I don't make lunches for them, but, just a text or a note or a call or, whatever, just kind of decide, I don't know, if I find out somebody's in the middle of something. And then I've appreciated when people have done that for me, if I'm, kind of, man, I'm kind of in the middle of this thing. And all of a sudden, and I think you've been that guy for me, more than once. So, anyway, that's sort of a tradition that I expanded on, and so, that's part of what I do.
That's really a great idea. And the thing I would just encourage those of you that are listening today to the fourth place, one of the things I've learned, your past in regards, you can grow up in some great environments. Sounds like, Rick, you got to do that. I had a challenging one. But one of the things is your past can either haunt you or guide you. And I think you've given a really great piece of direction on people to go, hey, in that home life, go find the middle with the people that matter to you. And all I got to do is tweak that idea before you. And I've had a great idea today. So thank you for that. I just appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, I think it's true. Yeah. Because I mean, I actually am kind of an outlier because I have the same parents, my whole kidhood and all that. And, most of my friends, haven't. And I used to tell my parents, you're going to have to go stand in the Smithsonian, and just stand there so people can see, what it looks like. But I do think no matter what kind of family life, that you have, you can either think, man, that was so awesome, I'm going to replicate it, or, hey, that was not great, so I'm not going to replicate it. But you can tweak it. But I think what's fun about it is, man, it's it keeps moving because now, I mean, you think, well, I didn't know my grandpa, very much, right? Well, now I'm a grandpa, so I'm not going to let that happen, so I think it's takeaways for sure.
Yeah, it's really great. It is a great transition to that second place, that where the majority of people's best of their day is given, it's work. And one of the great things about you, you've had such an incredible opportunity in different paths of careers, from comedy to radio to, speaking, to all kinds of things. So when you talk about work life, what was your first job? What was your worst job? And those two things kind of set the structure for kind of how you get to where where you go. Tell me about your first job and the worst job.
Okay. Well, here's what I did. I thought, I understood, that, the vibe of the fourth place here. So I made a list so I could remind myself. And I found out after this list that the thing that I've been best at is former. I'm the former so many things. So here's what I first started out as I'm a former janitorial intern. I worked as a janitor, as a high school kid. I'm a former cattle rustler. I worked on a farm, we drove cattle. I'm a former hay hauler because I grew up in the farm, so we had to throw hay out, feed the cattle and all that. I'm a former wheat truck driver because I grew up in the Palouse, where they grow a lot of wheat, so we all had to drive trucks. I'm a former forklift operator. After I got in college, I was an insecticide and herbicide fertilizer applicator. Another farm thing. I'm a former customer appreciation drink deliverer because what happened was I worked for this company and they were a fertilizer company, so they're super busy in the spring, but during harvest, nobody fertilizes. So we just drive around this pickup truck and give people beer. So that was like probably the most popular guy I've ever been. and then I'm a former Amtrak sleeping car porter. I had a run from Seattle to Chicago for 3 years when I was in college. That's fun, a bunch of stories
And that
there.
has a
And
bunch
then
of stories all by itself, doesn't it?
yeah, that's the empire builder, man, from Seattle to Chicago. So then I'm a former carpenter because I got some jobs, some odd jobs, and then I built 3 houses because I learned how to do it. So that's been kind of a good takeaway. I'm a
Former
former
contractor.
former contractor, former polyethylene manufacturing and sales representative because
Go
I worked
Monty.
Monty taught me, the other Monty taught me, he had a company that worked with like, industry and was a plastics firm. So I learned all about that. Then former youth pastor, former keynote speaker at conferences, former stand-up comic, former filmmaker, because I made a bunch of, short films and stuff. Former media marketing specialist, because I did a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Former radio talk show host, like you said, on CBS Radio in Seattle, the variety show. That was fun. And then I'm a former professor at the University of Washington, Tacoma, and at Northwest University. I taught 6 years of video stuff there. And then, former podcaster and current, and pastor, and now writer.
I know.
What in the world?
Yeah, that's really fun to hear.
So I guess out of all that, honestly, to narrow it down, my first job was my worst job. And I think I've always told my kids that you got to get that first baseline job. Then no matter what else you're doing, you're thinking, I don't know if I like this, but it's sure better than that one,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I started at a tire shop.
That's hard
tires.
work, dude.
Yeah, I worked hard. And then I graduated to, when I was able to actually have a car and get someplace to work. I was a fire alarm salesman.
Ah,
Oh yeah, that was critical, 'cause
I know a guy whose dad did that. So that was pretty cool.
I remember them taking me to the burn unit in San Antonio for motivation. I'll never forget. I was traumatized, afraid to let somebody walk out without a fire alarm. When you think about your work, it's really interesting. You've just all these formative things. But here's the thing, Rick, that I think is just so significant. It's one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you as a guest. In all of your formers, there are people that currently count you the person that made their impact. All of those former speaker, former pastor, former communicator.
Yeah.
So many people. I was thinking about as I was preparing for this today, in the work that you did, people felt inspired, challenged, and encouraged by you. You are without a doubt. I don't think there's anybody that would refute me. And if they do, well, let's just take them on. I mean, let's
go.
Is that you're probably one of the best encouragers because you actually do realize it's the middle. I think it's just, as I'm listening to you talk, I think, wow, that's really an amazing thing. So one of the things while we talk about work, one of the current things you're currently working on and just finished working on is that you just wrote a book called Low Hanging Truth. And I just think it is fascinating. I'd love you to talk a little bit about that. And all of that's kind of framed around things that you've learned, lessons in life, simple truths. So talk a little bit about it. And if you got a copy of there, show it to the people.
Well, there she is right there. Low hanging truth. Yeah. So I sort of subtitled it Short Stories for the Long Haul. I kind of thought of, again, graduates, like people that graduate high school, college, how you're always kind of looking for a book to give them. And sometimes you give them this dear graduate and they go, thank you, and of course, Dr. Seuss is still, top of the list on, the places you'll go, with his approach. So I thought, well, what about some short stories, that are, true-ish and, from my experience but they have kind of a, what I call a low-hanging truth, but like a moral to the story or like a takeaway or a lesson.
Right.
And so that you could say, oh, wow, this is kind of helpful, So, and again, like you said, I appreciate you saying that, but I think what I have always had, I guess I would consider this like sort of a gift. I don't think I really develop. Well, I mean, I try to develop it, but I think I just got it. And that is that I always see so much potential in other people. Like I always believe I have plans for other people that they don't have for themselves. And sometimes that's been disappointing because, I've said like, man, I think you could do, and then people go like, yeah, nah. And I think, oh, too bad. But I think that's what I really have a deep down belief, like, man, you would be awesome, and so I'm kind of, I guess like an unofficial cheerleader. I suppose some people are thinking like, hey, I didn't really invite you to, believe in me. So like go away. But but anyway, and I think through all of my former stuff, there's two little threads that kind of, run through there. And one of them
Yeah,
is relationships. I love friends, I love making friends and keeping friends
yeah,
and, like, just like you and I mean, like, I think I have a pretty, and I think both of us have a pretty amazing collection of friends that are like, long-term friendships. And of
yep,
course, now there's all kinds of studies that indicate that's, really helpful for, all kinds of
yep,
emotional and, every kind of health. So, and then the second thing is that I'm always been, and again, you and I think we share this, able to communicate,
yeah,
something I'm thinking, so there's a lot of people that have great thoughts, but they're not maybe, they can't quite connect, what they're
yeah,
trying to say or so I've been a student of that. So that's what when I went to graduate school, I studied um communicative action, which is like a whole science of how can people, like, how do you know somebody heard you. And some of my favorite guys are like Jürgen Habermas and some of these German guys that are, really smart, but they say, well, when somebody acts on, what you said to them, then you could say, oh, well, I think they heard me. Because, there's some people that say, well, communication is not what you say, but what people heard you say. Okay, but how do you know what they heard you say? And so one of the things they're saying is that, like, well, if you, like, for instance, that's why so many people thrive in sales, because they go, hey, they give all the reasons why they think you should buy this, and then when somebody buys it, they go, hey, I think they heard me, right? I mean,
yeah,
because they something happened. And I think there's something like that, and also in church work where I've been a pastor, where when you tell people about life and you say, hey, you know, uh, I think this would be a good move for you, if you just decided to trust outside of yourself, and then when people do it, you think, hey, I think they heard me, and
yeah,
I think we've all done that even for each other. We say like, hey,
sure.
so I think that's part of it. But in this little another commercial, okay, in this book here,
Yeah,
what happened was this lady that did the forward is a famous writer, and I didn't know that. I just met her, and eventually found out she's a great writer. And she said to me, hey, you know what? When I started out, and she's written like a lot of books, and this is my first try, but she said, I was a storyteller, but I didn't know how to write. She said, I know you're a storyteller, because she'd heard me,
yeah,
talk a bit. And she said, but you probably don't know how to write, but you want to learn? And I go, sure. I mean, I think all of us have said, hey, someday I'll write a book. But like, I was like, eh. And so she said, well, here's what you can do. So she set me up and said, I need one story a month by the end of the month, and with a deadline, just a few pages, but just, and so she explains that in the forward a little bit. And so she really was, she gave me a huge gift,
she was a catalyst.
because when I first started,
Yeah,
you probably remember this when you first got invited to speak somewhere. Hey, can you come and, you know, do, address a topic? Sometimes you're thinking, oh man, I'm nervous or whatever. And then after you do it a lot, I guess, now it's been disproven that the 10,000 hour thing is true, but hey, kind of. So,
yeah,
but after you do it, then you kind of look forward to it, right? So that's what happened with me when I first started writing. I'm like, man, I was like, I got to do this term paper, I got to get this done. Like, but then the more I did it, the more I started enjoying it and looking forward to it. Like, hey, I got another idea. So that's kind of what this book is. This is just 31 short stories, and that I try to, and I'm not trying to push something on people like, hey,
yeah.
here's the truth. I'm just saying like, hey, haven't you thought about this, or stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, it's really fascinating. I really appreciate you talking about it, because as you and I met, I've always been a person that I love to help other people win as well. And this is actually a book that we're going to be giving to all of our clients as something
Mm,
that we just believe is that these are just nuggets that'll just help you look at life in a different way and look at all of
yeah.
it. And I think it's really going to
Yeah.
be a fun thing. I'm excited about that for our people. But one of the things that you said is one of the projects that I worked on and wrote, it's been one of the most important things, is how to help people make decisions. And I developed this resource called Questions to Live and Lead By. And it's
Mm,
on,
yeah.
came up with a series of questions on how do you help people make good decisions. And I actually use the communication framework. And here's what I think you do so well that has actually allowed people to go to that action place. And one of the things in that model that I created was you have to remove ambiguity,
Mhm.
indifference, ignorance, or until something affects you negatively or personally, you'll remain largely ambiguous. You were able and are still able and do it really well. You just remove ambiguity on an issue. And the second thing in our model was that you have to gain awareness, information, insight, instruction. And you made hard things palatable, like palpable. I can do, all right,
Yeah.
that's funny, but that's real, but that's actually insightful. You're kind of a creative genius in terms of information. And then people will be like, oh, wow.
Yeah, well, you know, I think I share this with you in the sense that, and again, I'm not sure where this came from, but I'm really thankful for it. And that is like, I think we both have just a curiosity, you know.
Yes.
And I've always said this that, and I'm sure I must have heard it somewhere, but I can't remember where. But I don't think that I'm really looking. I don't think anybody's really looking for somebody who has all the answers. But to your point, I think we're looking for somebody who has better questions because, you know, we're all going to be, you know, sort of able to, you know, like
Yeah.
pontificate on the answers. But it's when you get some direction on how to really inquire about something and how to, you know, and I think so that's what to me, I think the highest form of communication is discourse, you know, and it's when you can get in a conversation with somebody
Yeah.
and you can even completely disagree with, you know, sort of their
Yeah.
opinion or maybe their present, you know, sort of evaluation of something. But it's just as long as you maintain a curiosity, like, oh yeah, I see. No, tell me more about that. You know, and I think that's what you've done. You know, with
Yeah.
as you sort of help us interrogate
Yeah.
um, what we didn't know how to we didn't know what the questions were.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. That third point in our model, remove ambiguity, gain awareness, come to agreement. And I was telling someone speaking at a corporation this last week, and I go, man, it was really interesting. One of the people that really taught me about the word agreement and the difference between agreement and action was the faith community, because I have had the privilege of going in and sitting in that environment and having people speak and them going, that's right. That's right.
Hmm.
I agree. Good. I'm not going to do it, but that's really amazing truth. And I think one of the things that's important about work is that in terms of the work life that you've done, you've taken people in your second place and moved them to a better place, which leads
Mm.
to this third area, the third place. Howard Schultz
Yeah,
kind of came up with the term of Starbucks creation. I want to create third places that people want to go, can come and go, and they can stay there, but they can leave. Vacation spots. I've often said
yeah.
faith communities are third places, beach
Hmm.
resorts. Some people vacation to the same spot every year. What
Yeah.
is Rick Enloe's third place?
Yeah, I guess you know, for me, I'm always most excited about and looking forward to like a crowd. I like being in crowds. I like restaurants that are noisy because, and I like cities because I like a bunch of people. It might be related to the fact that I grew up, you know, like in such a small town, but I really think that there's something about a city that consolidates services and you can't, you know, I've studied a lot about the Greek polis, you know, the cities in ancient Greece, and of course the really smart guys like Aristotle who, you know, invented them. But and I had a chance to go to Athens, you know, and one of the things that was interesting about the design of the cities was, you know, there was people with the waterfront, you know, homes, you know, and people over here that were just the, you know, sort of hourly folk. But the way the city was set up is they all had to cross paths, you know, as a part of just the structure of the city. And so I've always felt like that's where that's my favorite third place is. And that's why I guess, you know, a coffee shop is like that, or
Yeah.
you know, I like, you know, events, sporting events, you know, like any kind of concert, whatever. So I just think that to me, I feel energized by crowds. Now I have some friends who are brilliant, you know, great friends that I've known for a long time, and they are just drained, by being with
I
people,
know. Yeah.
and they get energized, in solitude, so not that they're not lonely, but they want to be alone, and they just get fueled up, and I went with this one guy to a monastery, and it was going to be like you're supposed to not talk and just be by yourself for like a few days. And so he just was loving it. And I walked out of the monastery property down this road about 4 miles and started helping this guy at a gas station. Like, because, I just thought,
I
hey,
gotta be with
I
some
can't
people.
spend all. And I mean, I just said to him, "Hey, I'm staying at the monastery. Do you need any help?" And he says, "Sure. Why don't you grab that thing?" And I just like made friends with him and screwed around at this gas station, and then went back. And the guy, when I met the guy, he goes, "Hasn't this been just, because the only time you could talk was at dinner." So he goes, "Hasn't this been a wonderful day?" And I go, "Totally." But
I totally agree, Nick.
so anyway,
It's
I
so
guess I don't know if that's like a third place, but those are third places
Oh
for
no,
me.
I think it is. I always say that people say, they've asked me, well, when I've talked about this subject, what's your third place? And I go, cement, skyscrapers, Starbucks, and crowds.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that gathering. So we have that in common. And one of the things that I think is really important about whatever your third place is, you have fun.
Yeah.
What's fun for Rick Enloe? Where do you just go? Now that was fun. What are some of the fun moments that you think about, man, those kind of places? I've been with people, I'm speaking. What are some of the fun
Yeah.
things about third places you've been?
Well, I mean, Marvelly and I, we've been, married for a few decades, and so whenever we discover something, that's really fun for me. So we're the kind of people, like we talk, and we don't have anything against people that go to the same. Like you said, they have a timeshare and they go back every year because they know the restaurants and they know where to go. We're the opposite. We're like, hey, we've been there, let's go somewhere else. There's just too many places that I haven't been, and so we keep discovering. So that's fun for me. And then we already talked about golf. I really have fun golfing because I'm not really trying to get like the best score of the world, but I'm thinking, I'm going to take about 100 shots here. But if 2 or 3 of them are spectacular, I mean, that's all you need. Sitting around, in the bar afterwards, just saying, "How about that shot on number 4?" And to me, that's really fun. We had a deal once where for like 10 years, because I grew up on a dirt farm, so not a lot of boating, but I live in a boating community for the last three decades, and so we started racing sailboats, and they're these 20-foot 2 guy. So me and this guy, it was our boat, and it was just so much fun because what it was is we're not that good at sailing, and neither was anybody else, but we're trying to, and it was like pretty competitive. And there's about 12 boats, and they'd set up the buoys and we do this thing, and but the funnest part was after it was over, just this giant argument, for like, "You cut us off." No, we were starboard. And so we had rights, back and forth. And anyway, it was all in good humor, but I always look forward to that. That was fun because it was, again, like same thing with golf, there's a little bit of competition, but it's more like just being together and,
Yeah.
giving each other a bad time. Yeah.
I think that's really a tremendous thing. And one of the things I've discovered, I call it soul speak. I'm like, let's lean into conversation. I want to know the person. I want to
Hmm.
sense their identity. That's just the way I'm wired. And I always ask people, so what do you do for fun? And I am fascinated at the number of people that don't have the ability to answer that question. I was with
Yeah.
a group, I had spoken there previously, and I hadn't got to meet the host wife. And so we went to dinner my second year, got invited back. They were gluttons for punishment, so they said, "Hey, come
Yeah.
back."
Yeah.
And went to dinner with the wife. And so we're sitting there, and I just, started the conversation, hadn't met her before. And I go, "Well, tell me, what do you two like to do for fun?" And he speaks up and he goes, "Oh man,
Mm.
we love camping." And immediately she goes, "Camping? When was the last time we went camping?" And I'm just like, "Oh, well." And he kind of laughs it off. He goes, "Yeah, that's probably true. It's been a while." He goes, "But we love to walk." And she goes, "Walk? I've asked you to walk." And I'm like, "Let's get ready to move." And all I did was ask, "What do you do for fun?" You have
Yeah.
been great at creating memories for so many people. And one of the things, Rick, that I think's great about you, not many people can be a third place. But one of my encouragements I try to be is be a third place that somebody would want to walk toward instead of away
Hmm.
from. I
Yeah.
don't know anybody that, in my experience, that ever wants to walk away from Rick Enloe. And I think you've actually been a third place. And I want to just encourage those people on this, listening to this podcast, even if it's just like four of our friends, I want
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Right. Right.
I want to encourage that whole mindset in terms of what's the third place. But one of the
Yeah.
questions before we go to this last place, the fourth place, what have been some of the challenges? You think about your home life, you think about your work life, you think about those third places. What have been some of the pain points, some of the challenges in life you really had to crawl over? And before we get to that fourth place topic, and I think you're going to land the plane on that amazingly, what's been Rick Enloe's pain points, challenges, things that you had to work through to get to this season of life that you're now enjoying, authoring a new book, getting to see grandkids, loving life, just celebrating as you normally do, but finding gems? What were the challenges? What are the pain points you even find yourself dealing with now that can be a reality for a lot of people that you go, man, I'm not immune to it. I haven't been able to just
Yeah.
beat it all. What would you say are some of those challenges, life issues you've had to crawl over to get to the place that you now get to live?
Well, I guess the big, the giant answer would be disappointment. I think that's the thing that devastates me the most is disappointment. Not so much failure or, I'm not even. I kind of don't even mind if things change. If you think, oh, that's not going that way, it's going this way. Let's see what happens here. So I'm okay with that. But I mean, um, when I really feel like something's possible and then it's just it unravels, it's just I feel disappointed. And of course there's other times where I mean things happen that I mean it's life, like we've had car accidents that were disappointing to me because you always think, oh, if I only would have this and that, and if we could have done it differently and all that. And then of course sometimes it's nothing you did, it's just that you were you got caught in friendly fire. But I still feel an overwhelming sense of like, oh man, I felt like that could have gone so well, but it just didn't, and I'm really disappointed about it. So that's kind of where I've sought therapy, is how to process disappointment. And I mean, even in my own life, like I'm so thankful for having inherited a strong body and a sharp mind and all that from all my DNA contributors. But I've had now to face some cancer stuff and different ones that and I think even in some of my past former work experiences, I felt like I could have led an organization to a place that would have been so exciting. But people are like, no, let's just keep it like it is, and so that was disappointing to me. And so the only reason I've ever kind of gone away from something is not so much because it's a challenge, but just because I don't think this is going to work, this is not going to happen. So well, and so that's disappointing to me. So I guess that would be my
Yeah,
pathology.
man, I appreciate the transparency on that because I think certainly that's a real word in a real world. I do a
Yeah.
talk called disappointment. It just won't go away.
Mm.
People will
Yeah, no kidding.
disappoint you. Life disappoints you. God disappoints you. We disappoint ourselves. And I think
Yeah.
it's really important. But one of the things that leads us to this last part of our time together today is this fourth place. And I want to define it. When I was working on what would be something unique about this podcast, first of all, we could just have really fun, engaging conversation that's not about, trying to do this or do that or do this. It's actually just really wanting people to feel like this is somebody I hear, I relate to, this helps, this encourages, this challenges, this moves me. And I really found that one of the places that I keep finding everybody wants to get to Home is important, work's important, third places are important, but we really do want to get to that fourth place. And I'll define it. I said it in the beginning, where passion and motivation meet with a determination and resolve to experience the destiny designed for you. It's that I chased it, I was hungry for it. It's the freedom place that you look at life, even if it's been a struggle in the past, not with regret, but with an understanding of that it allowed me to gain a character and a strength. You really have been a person that has led a lot of people to motivate them. And as I think about these words, you've inspired passion. You have brought about a motivation in people, and you have lived with a resolve and a determination that has led to a destiny that I think a lot of people would love to be in your shoes, that freedom place. What do you think's been some of the keys for you to find that fourth place? And I wouldn't tell you I'm an accurate affirmer. One of the worst things I ever did, I used to lead something, you would know about this, so you had some experience in this little, like this thing called, it was called like fine arts in this one program. And there would be people, and the people that were supporting them thought they were brilliant. And you would want to go, you need to shoot straight with them. This is not brilliant. Okay. And so there's a lot of people that have aspiration to live in a place. So I call them the pretenders. I say many people have the family reunion photo smile. Then you look at the picture and you go, they're not happy. I see that in life. What would you say in regards to being in the fourth place? And maybe you're not. And if so, we can talk after, as soon as we end the podcast. But I see you as being a person that's helped a lot of people get there. But those words have been true as I've seen you. Passion, motivation, determination, resolve, that has led to a destiny. What would you challenge others to do if they're wanting to find that fourth place? What's been some of the things you've done to make that happen?
Well, it's a great question again. Way to go on the question. I think early on, and this might have been easier for me because I wasn't raised, at a country club. I didn't go to an Ivy League school, all that kind of stuff. So I don't really know how difficult it would be for some people. But I think it's absolutely necessary to live with nothing to prove. And I think from the very beginning, like I've just decided, well, I got nothing to prove. I'm not trying to, you know, uh, you know, prove to somebody that I'm worth something. I just decided, I like me. And so I think that, and then I think what kind of is the first cousin and nothing to prove is nothing to lose. And that's where I say, like, since I wasn't raised,
Yeah.
with a lot of affluence, I was always pretty close to the curb. I would always think like, hey, you can have all this stuff because really I didn't have much stuff. But I think it's a good way to keep, no matter what you have, you could have all kinds of stuff. But how it is, Mont. Like a lot of times, we have some close, maybe associates, or maybe even ourselves. Maybe we've hit it big or whatever. And it's okay to. I always say to people, it's okay to own stuff as long as the stuff doesn't own you. And I think that's where you have to just say, hey, look, you always kind of have to get up in the morning and go, you can have all this stuff. It's fun. I like it. You should see how fast this Tesla goes. But at the same time, you can say like, yeah, but if I didn't have it, like, no, I'm not trying to prove anything with what I have. And I'm not trying to hold on to anything. One of my favorite, there's this book, it's kind of obscure. It's a leadership book, but it was about these three old ancient kings. And one of the kings he wanted to be king so bad that he's just always trying to grab it. Then there was another on the other side of it. The guy was the king and he wouldn't let go of it. He's like, no, and we can make a few jokes about that. Like, you lose the election, anyway. But I'm saying, it's all of us have that in us. Like, no, I'm still, and like you said, sometimes, hey, let go. You're not that person anymore. It's kind of like, let's face it. We were beautiful human beings, Mont, and now gravity is taking over. But it's kind of sad when you
What are
see
you talking
somebody.
about? I don't know what you're thinking of.
But it's kind of sad when you see somebody who says, I have to look like I did when, because I mean, we know the Greeks, all their Greek statues were 30-year-olds because they felt like 30 that was it, man. That's the prime. Well, God bless you if you're 30, and just, man, enjoy it. But, you weren't 30 and you won't be. And so what happens is if, it's just one of those things that you can try to hang on. But I love the middle king who just said, hey, he was the king and he's like, hey, thank you. And then when it was time for him to not be the king anymore, he's like, okay, no problem. And I think that's kind of, that the fourth place is a place where you think, look, I'm not grasping and I'm willing to live kind of with the open hand, like, okay, yeah, thank you for giving me that. Oh, you want it back? Fine, And I think so. I think those are the two guiding kind of since I worked on the railroad, I got the railroad track mentality. Like,
Yeah.
but just I like to live with like nothing to prove and nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And so. And if you
Well,
ever
I
see me
think,
golf, you know that.
well, I can tell you this, Rick. I think that one of the things I'm taking away from today is that I've seen you open your hand. It was interesting to watch you open your hands in that last point you made. I've seen you open your hand to a lot of people that didn't believe you would want to, or would care. And I've seen those people kind of gravitate. And it's been fascinating. As you know, you and I talked about what we want to do with your book. I just believe it just has some powerful things and it's just going to be fun for a lot of people. But one of the things that was most fun is that you and I have a lot of associated friends and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is my way to plug your book, I guess, when it's my turn, man, I'm coming. But one of the things that was so fun was on social media, the vast number of peoples that were connected to, scores of them.
Yeah.
How many people were so easily promoting why they thought they needed to get your book? And I think it's, Rick, because you've actually demonstrated a fourth place. I think of Matthew and Grant and how close you are, and just the journey that you've been on, and you've been such a model to follow. And I just think that this is an interview that people are going to listen to again and again. And I would just really challenge even yourself. Just know, as you've crawled through some of those disappointments, and it may be even a pain point today. I don't know that answer, but I know this: you've removed a lot of disappointment in a lot of people's lives. So thanks for the time today. And
Yeah, thanks, man.
thoughts that you want to share before we wrap it up today?
Well, I would say this. I didn't even think about what happens if, when you write a book, I mean, but, I didn't want to do something that was embarrassing. Like, have my kids go, thanks a lot, Dad, for, terrible book or whatever, because you know what I mean. And because, you have friends who know you and they're like, oh, it's great. And so, but what's been really cool about it is like what you're saying is people have, they've said, hey, man, like it's well written and it's interesting and it's helpful and like it's not embarrassing and then but I didn't even think about opportunities. Like I didn't think about that. I just thought, oh, this has been fun to do, this has been fun to write, and like it was, for me it was like, oh, I don't know, how do you publish? Oh, okay, that's how you publish. Like I didn't know what I was doing, but now, like, look at this, I'm on your podcast, and I never thought of that. I never thought I'll write a book, Monty will have me on the podcast. I mean, I wasn't doing it for that reason, but because that stuff is happening, it's like the funnest thing for me. And so I really appreciate you including me because I think, you know this very well, but all of us, are writing a story, maybe not, like on paper, but all of us, all of us are living our stories. And you have included me in your story. And I have benefited so much from that, and I appreciate it.
Been watching. This has been the Fourth Place Podcast. We'll look forward to our next episode. Please join us there. Have a great day, and let's go get after life.